toward our future. It tells a lot about the work of Professor Christina Voigt. She is a globally recognized scholar on environmental law. But as Professor Robinson already mentioned, she's also part of the negotiating team of Norway for many, many years in both biodiversity and climate change. And in fact, the text of the Paris Agreement has provisions that were crafted by her. She's too modest to speak about it, but if you later on ask her which provisions are those, she will point out to the language. In other words, she's not just someone that participates in the negotiation, but it's someone that delivers. And it's fantastic when you see in a text, be it a legislative text or an international agreement language that you helped crafting and drafting. But most importantly, I think when we talk about toward our future, is that if you decide to do environmental law, you cannot be a jurist of the present. You cannot be a jurist of the past. You have to be a jurist of the future and an optimist jurist. And no one has more optimism and energy than Professor Christina Voigt. I think this is, to me, the most important aspect that I would like, or quality that I would like to emphasize. Not your extraordinary academic qualifications, not the outstanding human being that you are, but especially that you do environmental law and you teach environmental law surrounded by optimism, that we can do better, that we can repair what we have damaged, and that human beings in general can evolve and can do much better. So on that note, Professor Voigt, please, we are here to listen to you.
Thank you so much, dear Justice Antonio Benjamin, for your kind words of introduction. Let's see about this accordion play. Let's see how that goes. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you, friends, colleagues, to join us on this common endeavor. But before I talk, I'd like to congratulate the Normandy Chair for Peace, and especially Professor Emily Gaillard. I don't see her right now because I don't really see anything, but I want to congratulate her to this fantastic event that she has been put together with IUCN and Professor Nick Robinson and partners. Now, the title of my talk, as Antonio already indicated, is Towards Our Future. And since this is a legal setting, and I'm a lawyer, and many of you are lawyers as well, I would like to share with you my hypothesis about what our future needs and what we can do to make it a sustainable one. My hypothesis is that our future depends to a very significant extent on the type of laws, on the kinds of laws that are enacted and implemented and complied with and enforced now. And by that, it also implies that our future depends to a significant degree on our shared legal vocation. Law is a governance tool. We know that law translates ethics and ideas and promises and political slogans into action. And history has shown time and time again that systemic changes whenever they happened, were anchored in legal structures. They could have been decisions by courts or constitutional provisions, but law has in many cases paved the road towards sustained systemic changes. And it is exactly those changes, those transformative changes that we need now more than ever. And when I say now, I mean now. I mean this decade that has already started, this decade until 2030, which is often referred to as the critical decade or the crucial decade. And I'm sure you've already talked about this a lot over the last 2 days. I'll briefly say a couple of words about why this is the critical decade, and second, then what role for law, and third, which laws and lawyers do we need. First, briefly to why this is the critical decade, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. And many of you who've been around for a while have heard that before, the time to act is now, and yet little had happened. But the time to act is really now. It is this decade, and this is what science tells us, that it has to be within this decade that these changes have to come underway in order to enable us to meet global goals by mid-century, and in order to ensure that planetary boundaries are not crossed. The scientific consensus, as you all know, is very clear, as in the recent reports by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the Intergovernmental Science and Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. We all know that the combined and mutually enhanced crises of a runaway climate, of biodiversity decline, of massive pollution of the oceans and land territories, they undermine the very basis of life, at least of life as we know it. They undermine prosperity and order, and they undermine the very book of life before we can even read it. Scientists have warned for many decades about the impacts of humans on natural systems, but they've never spoken so clearly and with so much certainty and force and urgency as in these last reports. Dear friends, the last few months, only here in Europe, summer, have shown us how a runaway climate change looks like. It is devastating, it is unplannable, and it is ultimately unlivable in many places. And if this is the reality already now with about 1.2 degrees warming, how would the world look like for our children and those that are not yet born if the world keeps on heating even further? Every degree of warming, and honestly, every ton of greenhouse gas emissions will increase the probability of severe droughts, as we've seen this year, of fires, of famine, of heavy precipitation, of floods, of landslides, of sea level rise, increased ocean acidity, and so forth. Similarly, for nature, across the globe, extinction has been unprecedented, extinction of species, unprecedented in human history, with the largest contribution by land use change. This sounds all very doom. But Antonio said, I'm always a optimist and positive. And I am, because science also tells us that we still have a chance, But the chance depends on the choices we make in this decade. As I said in the beginning, both of these scientific reports stress that addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, ocean pollution can only be achieved through transformative change. And transformative change are fundamental, system-wide reorganizations of society across all factors, across all sectors, involving paradigms, values, ethics, and of course, the law. And these system transitions that need to happen, they're unprecedented. Humans have never done that, not in scope and not in speed. And we have the choice between two different futures. I was supposed to talk about futures. We have the choice between two very different futures, between getting our act together and address these challenges in a fair and effective manner, or a future in which the world will look immeasurably different from the one that we know and from the one in which complex human systems have evolved. And as I said, the time span for making this decision between those two very different futures is short. It is now. It is now in this decade in order to see the effects of our decisions by around 2050. And that's why it is the critical decade. Beyond this decade, changes, if they come, will be too late, as most of these natural phenomena may have taken an irreversible turn. So let me move on to the role of law. That's why we're here. Climate change, biodiversity loss, ocean pollution, there are collective action problems that can only be addressed effectively through a system of international cooperation and ultimately international law. So there is a crucial, absolutely crucial role for international law and for lawyers, not just in creating a global level playing field, but in creating the legal structure for a coordinated response commensurate with these global challenges. But not only international law is needed, of course not. Legal responses and changes at all levels, including regional, national, local, all the way down to community and village levels and even individual levels. The need for law is clearly stressed in the IPBES report. One main intervention, they call it lever, to generate transformative change is by law and by environmental law, that they clearly identify as one of those levers, and environmental law's effective implementation. So what laws and what lawyers do we need? Now, the crucial role for law is clear. The crucial need for transformation is clear. What lawyers do we need? And I think we share, I hope at least, we share some ideas of what lawyers do we need in this transformation, in that transition. We need lawyers that are well informed, like you, all of you here and online. Lawyers that understand the science, the urgency, the complexity, and the implications of inaction. And we need lawyers that act based on a duty of care, ethics, diligence, wisdom, solidarity, dignity, respect and responsibility for present, but also for future generations. And of course, that is the topic of the symposium. We need lawyers that dare to think outside the box, that are visionary, who seek innovative solutions, that think unthought thoughts, that push the boundaries of our legal knowledge, for example, through rights for nature, for rivers, lakes, national parks, or through earth system law that combines environmental ethics and ecology and legal methodology. Lawyers that look for new tools, for example, ecocide, or new pathways, for example, a global pact for the environment, or new institutions, for example, a global environment court. We need those thinkers. We need those intellectual leaders. And we also need lawyers that are experts, if I may say so, within their box, that know their field, that analyze, interpret, apply, implement, enforce environmental laws that we have, review them, revise them, amend them with the aim of making them better and stronger and more effective, and fend off regression and work for improvement. But this does not apply only to the box, if I may say so, of environmental lawyers. It also applies to all legal boxes. We need environmental environmentally conscious lawyers in all areas of law, be they human rights law, trade, investment, criminal law, constitutional law, private contracts, whatever. In all these fields of law, we need lawyers that understand the science, that understand the environmental challenges that we face and the solutions that we have. They have to ensure that the advances in environmental protection are sustained and not futile or made futile by, for example, the dictates of international trade and investment protection, but they are synergetic and supplement each other and are mutually supportive. And finally, we need lawyers that do away with the boxes, that consider the big picture, that address issues of fragmentation, that work on new frontiers like AI, like Nick does, that work on a planetary level, and that aim to address the shortcomings of the legal system that exists, lawyers that work beyond the dictates of time and space and species, that consider global issues, that consider intertemporal and future rights of generations not yet born, and that include the non-human world, the natural world, in our legal deliberations of justice and fairness. We need lawyers in all legal professions from all corners of the legal community, including practicing lawyers, judges, academics, civil servants, company lawyers, law students, lawmakers, and all others working in and within the law. And we need them everywhere because these are global challenges in all countries, at all levels, all ages, gender, and all levels of career. We need lawyers that protect and use the law as a shield, and we need lawyers that fight and use the law as a sword. The IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law has set its goal to this end, I'll finish, and is of course with great honor and deference to its work and the work of its previous chairs and to all its members that I stand as candidate for its new chair. I will work for the Commission to influence, encourage, support, and stimulate societies and people throughout the world to employ the environmental rule of law, to protect the environment, to prevent harm, to conserve, restore, and recover nature. Together, and only together, we can initiate, we can foster, and we can sustain the changes necessary to avert climate change and nature catastrophes, and that we need to transition our societies and our laws towards a sustainable future. This requires of all of us to recognize and practice individual as well as institutional responsibility for the fate of our planet, our shared and only home. And I do believe that by mobilizing the tools of our shared legal vocation, we can make a difference towards our future. Thank you very much.